Hello everybody, welcome to Sabbath School. We're glad that you're here with us today for our Bible story. It's titled The Lion's Den. So I'm going to get our big Bible here, and you know already that all of the stories that come from our Bibles are true. They are stories that really happened. And this story is found right here in this part of our Bible. We're going to open it up and we find it in Daniel, and it's in chapter 6 of the book of Daniel. And we sure enough, we found a lion. What do lions have to do in a lion's den with our story today? Well, as we've been talking about Daniel and his friends and how they were taken away from Jerusalem to Babylon, and the king had a dream, and in his dream he saw this statue, the king of Babylon, and Daniel told him, "You're the head of gold." In our story last week, the head of gold was overthrown, taken over by a new king, by a new ruler, a new government, and the new one is the Medes and the Persians. So we're moving our way down here into the arms of and chest of silver. So there was a new king, and the new king was looking for people who could help him in his kingdom and who could be leaders in his kingdom. So he started choosing people to be in charge, and he picked some people that were from Babylon to be in charge, 120 of them, and then he picked 3 more to be just right above them, but right underneath him. So he's in charge, and then these 3, and then the 120. And guess who one of those 3 was? One of those 3 that was right underneath the king in power was Daniel. And Daniel was happy to help the king, to serve him, to do whatever needed to be done. Unfortunately, not everybody was happy that Daniel was chosen to be in charge of them. They didn't like that. So they watched Daniel very carefully, and they watched everything that he did, because they wanted to find him doing something wrong, something against the king, something against the law, so that Daniel would get in trouble and lose his job. And they watched and they watched and they watched, but Daniel didn't do anything wrong. He was polite to everybody. He was nice to everybody. He didn't break any laws. He respected the king, and he did everything exactly right that he was supposed to do. So these men kept watching, and they followed Daniel around for probably several days, maybe for quite a while. And they wanted to see what he did every day. So as they watched him every single day, they saw something that he did. Can you see Daniel way up here? And what this person thinks it might have looked like? He's at his window and he's doing something. He's praying at his window. And these jealous leaders that didn't get picked to be in charge, like Daniel was, they thought, aha, now we have something. There's some way that Daniel can get in trouble. So they made a plan. And they took their plan to the king. So they walked in with everything. They very carefully wrote it all down first on a piece of paper, and they walked in to see the king. And they told the king how wonderful he was, how amazing he was, what a wonderful leader he was. And they said, "Oh, king, wouldn't it be wonderful if for the next 30 days, for 30 whole days, that's like a month, everybody just asked you for whatever they needed. You would be in charge of everyone, and no matter what they needed, they would ask you, petition you, pray to you. Not to any other gods, not to any other person, not to nobody else. If they had a request, they have to come come and ask you. And the king thought, oh, they really like me and they think that I should do this, and this will just make me more important and more powerful, and everyone will come to me, and this will be very good. So they presented their rule on some paper, and the king signed it, and he sealed it in a special way. And they also knew that any law that was made like that could not be broken. There was no way to change it or to stop it. Once the king signed it and sealed it, it was law. It could not be changed. So they were really happy. They walked out of there and they could not wait to go and to watch to see what Daniel would do. What would he do when he heard about the law? Would he keep doing his regular thing, or would he do something else? Here they are presenting it, and the king is signing it. And then the law had to be read to all of the people. So somebody took it to this part of the city, somebody else took it somewhere else, all throughout the land. Different people had it, and they read it so everyone could hear it, and everyone would know that they had to pray to the king, to ask the king for whatever they needed for 30 days. And if they didn't, they would be thrown into the lion's den. Daniel heard it, and he knew what the law said, and now what was he going to do? Because he definitely hadn't been praying to the king before this. What would he do? So the king's men watched Daniel very carefully. They watched him go back to his house, and they watched to see if he would go up to his window and if he would pray in his window like they'd seen him do before. Sure enough, just like Daniel had done on days before, every morning, every day at noon, every day in the evening, he went by his window and faced outside to look at Jerusalem, and he prayed just like he always had done. Not to the king, not to King Darius, but he prayed to the God in heaven. And sure enough, those men were down there watching. And maybe they watched him do it once, maybe they watched him do it all day long. But they watched Daniel pray, and they knew that he had disobeyed the law, and that's what they had been waiting for. So as fast as they could go, they ran to tell who? You're right, they ran to tell the king. And when they ran to tell the king, or when they got to the king and they told him, they said, "Oh, king, there is someone in your kingdom who has already broken the law that you signed. You remember the law that you signed, that for 30 days no one could pray to anyone or to anything else except to you. No one could ask anyone else for anything except to you." They said somebody has already broken that law and they need to be punished. And the king was ready to punish until they said that the person who they had found that had disobeyed the law was Daniel. And then the king, his face must have just changed, and he knew they weren't trying to show that they respected him. They had been jealous. They were angry that Daniel had a higher position in the kingdom than they did, and they were upset about that. They just wanted to get rid of Daniel, and the king knew everything that was in their hearts and how much they hated Daniel and how much they wanted him to be gone. And now there was nothing he could do. Remember the law of the Medes and the Persians that the king signed? It couldn't be changed. It had to stay that way. There was nothing the king could do. He was so upset with himself. He was so upset with them. And he tried all day long to think of something that he could do, because Daniel was his friend. He wanted to save Daniel. He didn't know. He didn't realize. He didn't know that they had wanted him to do this law, to sign this law, just so they could get rid of Daniel. All day long, he thought and he thought and he thought and he tried and he tried and he tried to find a way, and there was nothing he could do. So the men came back to the king in the evening and they said, "It's time. Daniel has to be thrown into the lion's den. That's what the law says. You have to obey your own law." And so the king had nothing else that he could do.